Austin in December carried a dry chill not damp like the east, nor skin-cutting like the north. That afternoon, the sky hung heavy and gray, but the glass towers along Congress Avenue still reflected the last golden light of the day, casting the city in a weathered bronze hue. Harper Green stood in the 22nd floor conference room of Lumina Horizon Arms, folded across her chest, eyes trailing the slow crawl of traffic winding through the tangled streets below. A few employees remained the clatter of keyboards and hiss of the coffee machine, echoing faintly from the pantry down the hall. She was just about to return to her desk to finalize the quarterly financial report when her phone buzzed. On the screen appeared the name of her mother, Claire Green, 3 weeks before Christmas. Harper froze. In recent years, Christmas in her family had been reduced to a quick text, or at most a rushed call on the night of the 24th. A call this early in the season was rare indeed. "Harper, it's Mom." Her voice rang out carrying a blend of cheer and formality, the kind of tone she only used when she had something important to announce. "This year, your father and I have decided to make Christmas a little bigger. The Westfield family will be there, a few friends from the parish as well. The whole family will gather in Columbus like the old days. Can you arrange to come home?" Harper leaned lightly against the glass pane, her eyes still fixed on the hurried stream of people crossing the street below. A strange feeling stirred inside her, like after years of being pushed to the margins, someone had suddenly opened a door and invited her back to the old family table. "I'll make arrangements," she answered, keeping her voice as even as possible. Mother rushed to add, as if afraid Harper might change her mind. "Oh, and remember to wear something bright, darling. No need for those stiff office suits. You know the Westfields are quite successful. We should leave a good impression." Harper curved her lips into a faint smile that never reached her eyes. Yes, the Westfields. She had heard their name for over a year now, ever since Olivia, her younger sister, went public with her relationship with James Westfield, the only son of Boston's well-known legal dynasty. Every photo on her mother's Facebook revolved around fancy dinners, where James was present every post a subtle brag about her future son-in-law, with his spotless academic record. Harper was never in any of the pictures. 3 weeks before Christmas, Claire had called with that cheerful tone, reminding Harper about the dress code, about making an impression before the groom's family, about the whole family being together. A small part of Harper wanted to believe maybe this year was different, that they truly wanted her there, not because someone else was watching, but because she was their daughter. But only a week later, after she had just booked her Columbus-Austin flight, her phone rang again. This time it was Father. Richard Green rarely called her directly, so when his name appeared on the screen, she thought something urgent must have happened. "Harper." His voice was gravelly and firm without the circling warmth of her mother's. "I think this year you shouldn't come home for Christmas." She froze for several seconds. "What do you mean? Last week Mom said—" "We've talked it over," he cut in. "The Westfields will be there, and so will people from the parish. We want everything to go smoothly. You're too independent. Always talking about work. When people ask about family, about marriage plans, it becomes awkward. I'm only thinking of you." His words came out steady without a flicker of hesitation, as if he were talking about the weather. A hollow laugh rose in Harper's throat, choking her. They didn't want her home, not because she was busy or because the house was too small, but because her presence. The unmarried daughter past 30 running a tech company no one in her family had ever truly understood might make their Christmas gathering look less polished in the eyes of outsiders. Harper stared at the plane ticket still open on her laptop screen. One click was all it would take to refund it. On the other end of the line, her father kept speaking about family reputation, about how Olivia and James were such a perfect match, about how people will judge the eldest daughter of the Green family. His voice faded into static. Only one blunt thought echoed in her mind. "They're not forbidding me because I've done something wrong. They're forbidding me because I don't fit the picture they want to display." She ended the call, opened the airline's email, and canceled the ticket. Outside the glass window, Austin's streetlights flicked on their glow, glinting off the facades of tall buildings. She felt as though she stood on the far side of a thick wall, watching a glittering party where familiar faces smiled and clinked glasses, just with no seat reserved for her. In that moment, Memories she could never shake surged back. Columbus, Ohio. The city where Harper was born and raised was just big enough to have shopping centers lit year-round, yet small enough that every family in the neighborhood knew each other. In the front yard every summer, her father pitched a canopy for barbecues, and every winter, her mother strung lights along the porch so the house stood out brightly on the block. From the outside looking in, the Greens appeared to be the model American family: a father managing a retail chain, a mother working in a dental office, and two daughters, one older, one younger, always neatly dressed for the annual Thanksgiving church photo. But behind those framed pictures hanging in the living room, the reality was never quite so balanced. From a young age, her sister Olivia had always been the star of the family. Father often called her his stage girl, while mother said she was the perfectly feminine daughter. She was enrolled in ballet at the age of 5, later moving on to theater and choir classes. Every time there was a school performance, the entire family went together. Father brought along his camcorder, mother carried fresh flowers, and Harper was usually reminded, "Don't dress too formally, you'll overshadow your sister." At the end of every show, applause thundered as Olivia dashed backstage into waiting arms and endless praise, while Harper stood somewhere in the back holding her makeup box. As for Harper, her joy came from sitting in the robotics club wiring tiny circuits or pressing the slightly out-of-tune keys of the school's old piano. Once she made it to the finals of a citywide piano competition, and the teachers promised to send invitations to parents. But on the morning of the performance, Mother said, "Your father has to take Olivia to rehearsal, and I have a hair appointment for her. Just take the school bus, Harper. You're strong enough, you can handle it yourself." She nodded, swallowing hard. When the performance ended, she scanned the auditorium for familiar faces, but only empty seats stared back. During those childhood Christmases, it was always her grandmother, the only one who seemed to notice the silence inside Harper, who placed a small gift in her hand. Not a doll or a new dress, but glass snow globes. She told her, "When you shake it, the snow always falls at the right time, even if it's slow. Patience has its own kind of magic, Harper." She kept each one like a treasure lined up on the shelf in her bedroom. Whenever she felt invisible amid the cheers for Olivia, she would shake a globe, watch the white flakes drift slowly down onto the tiny house inside, and imagine a world where she too was seen and heard. The clearest turning point came in high school. Harper entered the statewide programming competition, and to everyone's surprise, won first place, a prestigious award no one from her school had earned in years. The computer lab erupted with cheers, and the principal even called her parents to share the news. She hoped just this once they would be proud. But when she came home, the announcement board in their living room was already plastered with oversized color prints of Olivia in her ball gown, her sparkling crown from being chosen for the homecoming court. Harper's photo, just a single small print from a cheap home printer, was tacked crookedly in the bottom corner, nearly hidden behind Olivia's radiant smile. She froze, but said nothing. At times she wondered if her parents didn't love her. But over the years she came to understand it wasn't outright rejection. In their eyes, Olivia was fragile, someone who needed protection. Harper, on the other hand, was already strong, able to handle herself. Whenever Harper was forgotten, their excuse was always the same: "You can endure it, Harper. If your sister failed, she would shatter." And so, unconsciously, they poured all their attention, money, and opportunities into Olivia, while Harper became the backup child left on the margins to build everything on her own. Once she overheard her mother late at night thinking she was asleep. "If Olivia falls, she'll never get back up. But Harper is different. She's tougher. She doesn't need us as much." Those words slipped into her ears like a fine blade and cut deep. They thought she didn't need them. But the truth was, she longed just once to be at the center, to be truly seen by her parents without having to carry the mask of strength. Those years taught Harper how to stand tall, yes, but they also carved out a lasting emptiness. That's why later on, whenever a Christmas phone call came, her heart tightened with both yearning and caution. She had grown so used to being the one who was fine on her own that even when she was invited back, she couldn't help but fear it was only to serve once again as the backdrop for someone else's spotlight. And it was from that childhood of blatant favoritism that Harper realized her journey would never be supported by her parents. If she wanted to be seen, if she wanted to be recognized, she would have to create her own light. By senior year of high school, when everyone began discussing colleges, she already knew she would have to carve out her own path. Olivia had a fund set aside for years, and her mother often bragged to the neighbors. My youngest will surely attend a prestigious private school, study communications, and go into entertainment or PR. She has such a gift for speaking and knows how to draw attention. As for Harper, when she asked her father about tuition, he merely cleared his throat and said, "You're strong enough to manage. We've given everything to your sister since the day she was born. We must ensure she has the best chance." She nodded without protest, too accustomed to that role by then. But she didn't give up. Harper devoted the entire summer before senior year to applying for scholarships everywhere, attending interviews, writing essays late into the night. The result was a full-ride scholarship to Ohio State University in computer science, with a minor in business. She could still remember the day the acceptance letter arrived, her hands trembling as she opened the envelope, her grandmother's words echoing in her head as clearly as the day she gave her that snow globe. "Patience has its own kind of magic, Harper." That magic had finally appeared. When she arrived in Columbus for college, Harper didn't just study, she threw herself into work. By day, she went to class. In the afternoons, she worked as a barista at a cafe near campus. In the evenings, she was a teaching assistant for the introductory programming course. And on weekends, she freelanced building websites for small shops around the city. Some nights she stumbled back to the dorm exhausted. But when she saw that her tuition and book fees were fully covered, she knew she had won an important battle. Meanwhile, Olivia's path was entirely different. She was accepted into an expensive private university in Florida, majoring in communications. On the day she left for the airport, her parents bustled around carrying her suitcases, snapping pictures, and showering her with reminders. "Just focus on studying. Don't worry about anything else. The family will take care of it all." Harper stood beside them, her own suitcase containing only a few plain clothes, no cameras, no farewell fanfare. She wasn't jealous, but she couldn't deny the feeling of being little more than a shadow. 2 years later, while Harper was cramming for finals and serving coffee on her night shift, Olivia called to announce, "I dropped out, Harper. Those classes were so boring. I want to take a gap year, move to LA, try content creation, maybe land a job at a big entertainment company." Harper listened while glancing at the chalkboard in the cafe where someone had scribbled, "out of milk," and she silently wondered how her parents were going to fund this new plan. But not long after, her mother's Facebook was filled with photos of Olivia posing on Santa Monica Beach, checking in at rooftop bars, captions brimming with pride. "My daughter is finding her new path, and the family fully supports her." Of course, that gap year was still financed by her parents. Harper's 4 years of college were 4 years of studying while working, accumulating every bit of experience she could. When she graduated with honors, she applied everywhere and was fortunate to land a job at a small tech startup in Denver as a product analyst. It wasn't a big company, barely a dozen employees squeezed into an office space rented from an old warehouse, but she treated it as her first step. In those early days in Denver, she walked to the office through snow and wind, ate cheap sandwiches for lunch, and sat glued to the screen late into the night. She learned to read customer data design reports and write user stories for the dev team. Every time the product rolled out a new feature that she had contributed to, she felt a little more that the sleepless nights had been worth it. About 2 years later, when the tech boom was surging in Texas, Harper decided to move to Austin. The city had become a magnet for companies big and small, with a cost of living far more manageable than Silicon Valley, and opportunities that stretched wide open. She packed her belongings into her old car and drove more than 1,000 miles south, her heart pounding with both nerves and excitement. She believed Austin would give her more than just a temporary chance. It could become the place where she built her future. While she was starting over with small projects in Austin, Olivia was still living off the steady stream of money from their parents. At times, she tried her hand as a content creator. Other times, she joined a fledgling PR agency. Her Instagram overflowed with pictures of chic brunches, beach vacations, and captions filled with inspirational lines about living life to the fullest. Meanwhile, Harper counted every dollar to cover rent for her tiny apartment and the cost of a new computer. In the first year after graduation, Harper still held on to a fragile hope that Christmas would mean family reunion. She sent her mother an email letting her know she had booked a flight back to Columbus. Her reply was short and sharp. "Harper, this year isn't convenient. The house is full. Too many guests. Save it for another time." Harper sat frozen in front of the screen, feeling that invisible wall rise again. That was the first crack, the warning sign of the years to come. Years in which she would be pushed out of Christmas with her family openly and without pretense. She reread the words, "The house is full, too many guests," and her chest tightened. That two-story house in Columbus was anything but cramped. It had 5 bedrooms and a living room big enough to host the entire parish. The truth was simpler. Her presence did not fit the picture they wanted to display to others. Harper closed the laptop and told herself, "Fine, if there is no place for me at their table, then I will build my own with the effort and work they never cared to notice." From that moment on, she knew a clear line had been drawn. Olivia would always be the center, the one cushioned and lifted up, while Harper would have to prove her worth entirely on her own, even if no one in the family ever acknowledged it. But from that fracture, her resolve only hardened. If she had to choose between being praised at a Christmas dinner table or building a life with meaning, she would choose the latter. The idea for Lumina Horizon didn't arrive in a dramatic Hollywood-style epiphany. It came after months of watching small businesses in Austin struggle to manage their customers. Harper often got her hair cut at a salon on South Lamar, where the staff scribbled appointments by hand in an old notebook, and one cancellation would throw off their entire schedule. She once spoke to a dentist in Round Rock who complained that their patient data was scattered across several different programs, none of which communicated with each other. Even HVAC repair shops faced the same issue, relying on Excel files and sticky notes plastered everywhere, with no system to predict when customers might return or when maintenance was due. Harper saw there plain as day, a massive gap. Service businesses, the backbone of everyday American life, were being ignored by the complicated, overpriced CRM software built only for large corporations. So she began jotting down ideas on anything within reach, from the notebook in her backpack to the back of coffee receipts. She envisioned a simple CRM platform designed specifically for small businesses, but with predictive power and an AI-driven system that could forecast customer behavior instead of merely logging it. Back then, AI wasn't the buzzword it is today, but Harper believed it could help a salon anticipate when a client might return for their next haircut, or enable a dentist to identify which patients were most likely to cancel, so they could call ahead with reminders. She spent the first 18 months bootstrapping building from nothing. She rented a small house on South Lamar, living in one room and turning the living room into an office. The furnishings were nothing more than a few IKEA desks. She assembled herself a cheap whiteboard she picked up at a flea market and a swivel chair she bought secondhand off Craigslist. Harper lived on instant ramen and gas station coffee every day, treating them as fuel to keep going. By day, she worked freelance contracts to cover rent, and by night she sat coding her product. There were nights she stayed at the screen until 3 in the morning typing out lines of Python, only to erase them rewriting again. Her mind foggy, but her hands still moving because she believed someday the software would work. When she finally had a demo, Harper started knocking on the doors of investors. She pitched to more than 40 funds, from well-known names in Austin to a few small groups in Dallas. 38 of them rejected her outright. Some scoffed, "CRM for salons, that's not scalable." Others dismissed her with, "If it's not built for enterprise, don't bother." She listened, swallowed every word, then went back to refining the code. At last, a small Dallas fund agreed to seed her along with 2 angel investors, one who had run a chain of dental clinics and another who operated an auto repair network. They understood the pain of the service industry, and they believed in her. On the day she signed the deal, holding that first check, Harper couldn't stop the tears from streaming down her face. But getting funding was only the beginning. The first 2 years, their burn rate was so intense, she often woke in the middle of the night heart-pounding, terrified the company would run out of money before they had real customers. They managed to hire a handful of engineers, but the product was clunky, hard to use. Customers tried it and left. Harper knew they had to pivot. After countless late-night discussions with her CTO and the team, they decided to add AI-assisted workflows. Instead of just storing data, the software would suggest appointments, automatically send reminders by email and SMS, even integrate voice to CRM, so staff could give commands by voice instead of typing. That pivot was what saved the company. In their third year, they signed a contract with a dental chain that had 120 branches across Texas. That was their first major client, the milestone that lifted Lumina Horizon out of being just an experiment. Local media began to take notice. The Austin Business Journal ran a piece about a CRM startup, redefining how small businesses manage their customers. Harper agreed to an interview, but used the byline HQ Green short for her full name, Harper Quinn Green. She chose that pseudonym both to protect her privacy and deep down because she wasn't ready for her parents or Olivia to know. Just as she expected, her family didn't make the connection. Her mother continued posting photos of Olivia at parties in Los Angeles, still calling her the pride of the family. Her father bragged to neighbors about Olivia's prestigious Westfield boyfriend. No one mentioned her name in the press because they never linked HQ Green to Harper Green, the eldest daughter they assumed was working some ordinary job somewhere. Olivia, who had never cared much for technology, had even less reason to suspect that the company being written about in Forbes or the Austin Chronicle was one her sister had founded. Her world and Harper's existed like two parallel tracks never crossing. They were busy painting Olivia as the ideal daughter, while Harper was building a company out of sleepless nights and cheap cups of coffee. And while they looked at her with that dismissive gaze, "She's fine, she's strong enough," she knew with certainty that every line of code, every pivot, every contract signed was proof of something she had created with her own hands. Something no one could ever deny, even if her family never saw it. 3 years after founding Lumina Horizon, they had their own office, more than 30 employees, and steady revenue. But to her family, Harper was still the daughter who doesn't need worry. She accepted that silence because by then she understood true recognition would never come from them. It had to come from herself, and from the people who trusted their careers to the same ship named Lumina Horizon. After that Christmas call from her father, slow and blunt like a dull knife not sharp enough to cut clean, but heavy enough to keep nicking at every day of late December, Harper sat in her small Austin apartment with her laptop open to the inbox, its pale light washing over her face. Her inbox filled with holiday outage emails from clients, a salon chain reporting data sync failures, a dental office saying the SMS reminder system was clogged. Instead of thinking about Christmas lights or the smell of roasted turkey, she was buried in logs and glaring red tickets. Maybe this was the way she had learned to cover the emptiness, turning pain into work, working until exhaustion, so there would be no mind left to remember the dinner table where she had no seat. Her phone buzzed. A message from Sophie, her college friend, who had seen her through nights of instant noodles and essay writing to the day she typed startup code in a cramped rented room. "Don't work from grief, Harper," she wrote. "Come over. Noah has saved a spot by the tree for Aunt Harper." Harper read it again and felt a lump rise in her throat. Noah was Sophie's 7-year-old son, the boy who always ran to hug her whenever she dropped by. At some point, she had become Aunt Harper to him. She didn't even notice when it happened. All she knew was that in that child's eyes, she wasn't an extra. She was family. She shut her laptop, pulled on a thick sweater, and drove through Austin streets on Christmas Eve. Rows of houses glowed with string lights, and the melody of Silent Night drifted out from a nearby church. When Harper stopped in front of Sophie's home in Round Rock, she saw small figures peeking out from behind the window. The moment she opened her car door, Noah and his little sister May came rushing out, feet still in wool socks, shouting, "Aunt Harper, you're here!" They grabbed her hands and pulled her inside, where the house was warm with the scent of cinnamon turkey and baked pies. At the table, Marcus, Sophie's husband, was carving a golden roast turkey. Sophie set down another plate for Harper and smiled. "Told you, this table always has a seat for you." Harper sat down, and for the first time in years, she felt invited rather than squeezed in. They ate, talked, and laughed out loud. The kids proudly showed her a new ornament hanging on the tree, a little globe with Aunt Harper, written in silver glitter pen. Noah beamed. I hung it at the very top so you can see it." Her chest tightened warm and stinging all at once. After dinner, they spread a board game across the table. Dice rolled. The kids bickered loudly over who was cheating, and Harper sat there with a glass of wine in hand, taking it all in. The room glowed with light and laughter. No one asked her when she was getting married. No one compared her to Olivia. No one mentioned titles or companies. They simply called her by her name, saved her a seat at the table, and treated her as someone who belonged. As the clock neared midnight, Harper stepped out onto the porch. The Austin air was crisp, the dry wind moving through bare trees. From her pocket, she pulled out an old snow globe, the gift her grandmother had once placed in her hand. She shook it gently and watched the tiny white flakes swirl inside, falling over the little house encased in glass. In that moment, she whispered to herself, "Enough. No more asking for worth. No more waiting outside the door. From now on, I choose my own table." Driving home, she passed through downtown. In the distance, the giant Zilker tree blazed thousands of lights strung into a shimmering cone. She pulled over by the curb, took out her phone, and typed a message to Sophie. "Thank you for saving me a seat at the table. That seat saved me more than you know." After hitting send, Harper sat in silence, watching the Zilker lights twinkle against the reflection on her windshield. There were no more tears, only a quiet resolve. Christmas no longer meant waiting for an invitation to the old table. It meant finding the place where someone truly saved her, a seat where she was seen loved and allowed to simply be herself. And in that moment of clarity, Harper knew what would come next. The old invitation might be rescinded. The old door closed, but ahead lay something truer than what she'd left behind. A life built on her own terms, where worth wasn't granted from above, but recognized by those who truly saw her. It was time to build her own table, not out of spite, but out of the certainty that there was room in this world for the person she actually was, not just the person her family wished she would be. During the week between Christmas and New Year's, when most of Austin glowed with holiday lights and year-end parties, Harper stayed in the Lumina Horizon office. The glow of her monitor spilled across a desk cluttered with sticky notes and strategy charts. Outside downtown was unusually still, but inside her mind spun like gears. It wasn't sorrow over being left behind by her family anymore. It was a strange surge of energy, as if the pain she had just endured had forced her to choose keep knocking on the old door or open one entirely her own. She chose her own door. For 5 straight days, Harper practically lived in the office, leaving her chair only to run laps around Lady Bird Lake to clear her head. She sketched out a 5-year plan for Lumina Horizon, not only to secure their hold on the Texas market, but to expand eastward. Nashville emerged as the strongest candidate, a major healthcare hub with lower operating costs than New York, and a talent pool stretching across Appalachia. She scheduled Zoom calls with their market research team, instructing them to conduct a detailed survey of real estate and the startup ecosystem there. Every bullet point in that plan felt like a new stitch closing the wound Christmas had left behind. By the first quarter, things moved faster than Harper expected. 2 Fortune 500 clients signed contracts to integrate Lumina Horizon across their entire service networks. One was a logistics company, the other a healthcare insurance giant. Those 2 names alone were enough to catapult their brand forward. Harper slept only 3 or 4 hours a night, but instead of exhaustion, she felt sharper than ever. Sometimes standing in the conference room, catching the spark in her employees' eyes as she announced new wins, she thought to herself, "This is my real family. The people who don't need me to prove blood ties only to keep my word and walk the road with them." To meet the surge in demand, she worked with HR to launch a recruitment plan for 30 new roles, from AI engineers and product managers to customer support staff. They built an API marketplace, allowing outside developers to plug apps directly into their platform, an ambitious step that turned Lumina Horizon from a product into an ecosystem. On a Monday afternoon, the office still carried the faint aroma of coffee from the shop downstairs. Harper had just walked out of a meeting about the Nashville expansion when Isabella, their head of HR, knocked on her office door. She was holding a thick folder clipped inside the familiar blue binder of their applicant tracking system. Her expression was taut, somewhere between hesitation and the strict composure of someone bound by procedure. "Harper, There's an application I think you need to see right away. Isabella began setting the folder down in front of her. On the label, Harper read the name Olivia Green. Her heart stalled. Her eyes locked on the bold letters. My sister, Harper said softly. Isabella went on, her tone steady and professional, as if she were reporting any other case. The candidate applied for the senior program manager role in the AI platform division. It's the position we just posted last week with very specific requirements: at least 5 years of experience managing tech projects, knowledge of Agile and Scrum basic SQL skills, and at least some familiarity with the machine learning lifecycle. She paused slightly. This application is missing a lot of pieces. Harper flipped to the first page. Olivia's work history centered almost entirely on PR, brand partnerships, and media events. She led digital campaigns for multiple brands, but there was no technical detail to be found. Even the KPI section contained numbers inflated so much that HR had underlined them for verification. Harper swallowed hard. This was clearly not the right fit for such a technical role. But the more pressing matter wasn't the skills gap. It was the last name printed at the top. Conflict of interest, Isabella said plainly. You're the CEO and the applicant is your sister. Compliance requires you to file a recusal memo immediately. Harper nodded and opened her laptop. Within 5 minutes, she drafted an email to the entire hiring team. I confirm a direct family relationship with applicant Olivia Green. Therefore, I will withdraw from all stages of screening and interviews until the final round, if applicable, where the CEO normally participates as a member of the board. Any decision to advance or decline will be based solely on standardized scoring and reviewer comments. Isabella also logged the note directly into the ATS to ensure transparency, so no one could later claim Olivia's application had been paved forward or blocked unfairly. Closing her laptop, Harper exhaled slowly. If she makes it past round 1, how do we handle it? She asked. Isabella had already prepared. By law, before the final round, the company must obtain written consent from the candidate, informing her that a board member who is a direct relative will be present. No names disclosed, only that a direct family member is involved, so the candidate can decide whether to proceed. If Olivia agrees, you'll attend, as always, observing, quietly, asking nothing until the last 5 minutes, and your questions must follow the exact same format as every other candidate. Harper sat in silence for a long moment. Even in her imagination, she had never pictured the day her sister would submit an application to the very company she had built from scraps. This application, Harper flipped back to the skills page. How did it even pass the initial screen? Isabella shrugged, a mix of apology and pragmatism. Some of the reviewers rated her network highly. She claims connections with several major media companies, which they thought could become potential clients. Technically, she's lacking, but their argument was she can learn on the job. Harper closed her eyes, the memories flooding back, how many times Olivia had been lifted forward simply because of who she knew. History repeating itself. But this time, Harper wasn't the powerless one. All right, she said slowly. Let the process run its course. Don't give her preference, but don't cut her early just because she's my sister. If the scoring system moves her through round 1, let her continue like any other candidate. And if she makes it to the final round, follow procedure. Notify that a board member who is a relative will be present and obtain her consent. I'll sit quietly, observe, and only ask my portion at the end. Nothing more. Isabella nodded, her eyes steady with respect. I knew you'd handle it this way. When she left the room, Harper sat alone, staring at the blue folder still resting on the desk. Outside, the Austin sun tilted into gold, pouring down onto the traffic along Congress Avenue. Her fingers brushed the small snow globe on the bookshelf, and in her mind she whispered, "This time I won't let emotion drive me. This time I will stand firmly in my role both as sister and as CEO, and no one will cross that boundary." The glass-walled conference room on Lumina Horizon's 17th floor glowed with Austin's afternoon light. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the bustling view of Congress Avenue below. On the long oak table, Isabella had already arranged bottles of water, folders, and laptops for the final interview of the senior program manager role. Marcus, their CTO, with his graying hair and steady baritone voice, sat on the left. Elena, a seasoned senior PM who had led multiple successful AI projects, sat on the right. Their focus wasn't on Harper. They were absorbed in checking the agenda. Her role as CEO was to enter only in the last minutes, exactly as every other candidate before her had experienced. The door opened, and Olivia walked in. She wore a chic beige blazer dress, her hair styled in loose waves, her eyes bright with confidence. She carried herself as if this room were just another familiar stage. "Thank you for this opportunity," she began, her voice sweet, her gestures polished. When Isabella invited her to introduce herself, Olivia launched into a smooth monologue about her ability to connect people, her experience, managing multi-million-dollar brand campaigns, and her belief that leadership matters more than technical details. Marcus gave a slight nod, his expression unreadable, before moving to a specific question. "If you had to set up a Kanban board for the AI platform team, where would you start and how would you measure velocity?" Olivia hesitated just for a moment, then quickly smiled, answering in broad strokes. "I believe in flexibility. Teams need vision more than being confined by numbers like velocity. What matters most is that people feel guided." Elena tilted her head, offering a polite smile, but she didn't jot down much. A little later, Elena leaned forward with her question. "Suppose QA discovers a bug in the final sprint, but the deadline has already been promised to the client. How would you balance quality with delivery?" Olivia blinked, then replied with more sweeping phrases. "I think my role is to keep the team's spirit high, to focus on the big picture. If necessary, I'd inspire the team to overcome obstacles." Not a single word about test plans, risk assessments, or rollback strategies. Marcus tried another sharper question. "At Lumina, our AI pipeline has three critical handoff points. Data science delivers the model product, writes the spec, and QA conducts testing. How would you coordinate to minimize friction?" Olivia faltered, then pivoted back to PR. "I've managed many cross-department projects. Like when I led a media campaign, I had to coordinate with the production house and the events team. I know how to make everyone feel like part of a shared story." Marcus set his pen down, disappointment flickering in his eyes. For nearly 40 minutes, Olivia sidestepped every technical question, leaning instead on slogans about vision, empowerment, and leadership. Isabella maintained a neutral expression until the clock ticked into the final minutes. She cleared her throat. "Per procedure, the CEO of Lumina Horizon will now join for the last 5 minutes. The candidate has already given consent. Please come in." The door opened. Harper stepped inside, dressed in a deep blue blazer, hair neatly tied back. Olivia turned her eyes, locking onto her sister's, her face freezing mid-expression. Her mouth opened slightly, disbelief spilling into the room. You're the CEO?" Her voice broke. Harper met her gaze, her tone even. "Yes, at work I am HQ Green, and today I'm just one member of the hiring board." Silence swept the room. Harper sat across from Olivia, opened her file, and spoke softly but with precision. "Olivia, give me an example of a basic SQL query to calculate a retention cohort. For instance, the percentage of users who return within 30 days. Olivia blinked rapidly, her hands twisting together. I usually delegate that to a data analyst. My role is setting the direction, not writing SQL myself." Harper nodded, made a note, and let the silence settle. Her second question came gently. "If you had to write acceptance criteria for a feature that records customer calls in the CRM, how would you describe it?" Olivia forced a smile. "I'd let the engineers define the details. My job would just be to make sure the feature creates value for customers." Elena glanced at Harper, her eyes quietly confirming that the answer was nowhere near the requirements of the role. Harper asked one final question. "In a cross-team situation where the timeline is slipping, who owns the schedule, the PM or the tech lead?" Olivia hesitated. "I think anyone can own it. What matters is that everyone feels connected." Her voice trailed off, the confidence she carried at the start beginning to crack. Harper closed the folder, looking directly at her, but without sharpness. "Thank you, Olivia. As with every other candidate, HR will follow up after the panel completes its review. That concludes our session." She rose, shook Olivia's hand the same way she had with all the applicants before. Her hand was cold, trembling. Isabella led Olivia out of the room, while Marcus and Elena remained exchanging heavy looks. Harper didn't give a verdict on the spot. That was policy. Everything would be scored against the rubric recorded objectively. She only allowed herself one deep breath as the glass door closed, reflecting her face in the burnished glow of the Austin sunset. No triumph, no humiliation, only a truth laid bare. This time ability was the measure. There was no room for privilege. But Olivia didn't wait for HR's response. Barely an hour later, as Harper returned to her desk, the office door swung open. Her sister strode in, her face flushed eyes blazing with anger and disbelief. "You knew all along!" Her voice rang out high and sharp. "You sat there pretending to observe, but really you just wanted to humiliate me." Harper hadn't even spoken before two more figures appeared behind Olivia. Her father and mother Richard and Claire entered as though this company were theirs too, their eyes heavy with reproach. "We are family Harper." Her father began, his voice still as hard and commanding as when he used to scold her as a child. "You couldn't open one door for your sister. Just one decision from you and her future would be different." Harper drew in a long breath and kept her tone steady. "This is a company, not our living room. And here, everyone follows the same process." She pressed the intercom button. A minute later, Isabella and Elena entered. Harper invited them to sit, then turned back to face her family. "I want witnesses for this conversation so no one can claim I did anything wrong." She opened her laptop and pulled up the job description on the screen. The role Olivia applied for Senior Program Manager requires 5 years of experience managing technology projects, knowledge of Agile and Scrum Basic SQL, and familiarity with the machine learning lifecycle. The panel scored her against clear criteria. I recused myself from the earlier rounds and only joined for the final 5 minutes with the candidate's written consent. Every step has been documented in the system. Richard's voice grew sharp. "This process exists because you put it in place. You could choose to be flexible." Harper met his gaze directly. "No, father. This process exists to protect the company from bias and compromise. And precisely because I am Olivia's sister, I am the one who must never break it." Claire cut in. Then her voice sweet but edged. "That Christmas, the house was crowded. We didn't mean to forbid you. We just wanted everything neat and proper." Harper smiled, but her eyes stayed cold. "Mother, I remember clearly. You told me directly, 'Don't come home. You'll complicate things with the guests.' It wasn't about seating. It was because I didn't fit the image you wanted to display. I was too independent. I talked too much about work. I was different from Olivia, and that made you uncomfortable." The room sank into heavy silence. Olivia clutched her handbag, her voice trembling but sharp. "You always have to compete. You build a company. You flaunt your success. You make everyone see me as nothing but a leech." Harper answered slowly, every word deliberate. "No, Olivia, I'm not competing. I'm just done shrinking myself. I did that all through childhood so you could shine, so our parents could rest easy. But now I don't live that way anymore." Turning to her parents, her tone hardened, though her voice did not rise. "There is a position suitable for Olivia Marketing Coordinator entry level. If she does well, she can advance to Associate PM and from there move higher. That path is fair. There are no shortcuts." Richard slammed his hand on the table. "You dare make your sister start that low?" "Everyone starts where they are capable," Harper replied, her hand trembling slightly but her gaze steady. "I once made coffee and coded until 3 in the morning. No one put me on a pedestal. Fairness means the same for her." Claire turned away, her eyes clouded with both disappointment and helplessness. Olivia shot to her feet, her chair scraping harshly across the floor. "I don't need your pity. I'll find my own place." She stormed out, heels striking hard against the ground. Her parents rose too, their eyes laden with reproach, and followed their younger daughter out of the room. The door closed. The office fell so silent, Harper could hear her own heartbeat. Her hands trembled slightly on the table, but she did not break. Isabella placed a gentle hand on Harper's shoulder. "You did the right thing. The process was clear. The staff will respect that." Elena nodded in agreement. Harper drew in a deep breath and lifted her gaze to the window. Traffic still streamed endlessly down Congress Avenue, the Texas sun spilling across the red-tiled rooftops. She knew she had just lost something, or rather confirmed that it had never truly existed. Yet she also felt something else stronger. This boundary was hers, and it would keep her whole. A week after that confrontation in the office, news of Olivia reached Harper not through a family call, but via a forwarded email from a PR partner. A major promotional contract she had held with an international cosmetics brand collapsed within days. The cause: a live stream event riddled with technical errors. A social campaign launched without any crisis protocol, leaving the brand publicly mocked. Harper skimmed the report, feeling neither triumph nor pity, only a quiet acknowledgement. The world outside was far harsher than the safe stage their parents had always rolled out beneath Olivia's feet. Then came another piece of news, just as swiftly. James, the fiancé her family once hailed as the golden match, announced the postponement of their engagement. His reason was polished diplomatic: "I need to focus on work." But everyone understood the subtext: doubts born from Olivia's recent failures. Within a matter of days, her sister lost both her professional footing and her romantic security, plunging into a kind of crisis she had never faced before. One Friday afternoon, just as Harper wrapped up a meeting with the API Marketplace team, Isabella's voice came through the intercom. "Richard and Claire Green are in the lobby. They say they're your parents." Harper froze. For the first time in 10 years, her parents had set foot in Austin and at the very company she had built. When they stepped out of the elevator, Harper caught her father's eyes scanning the open office. Rows of engineers packed tightly at their coding desks, a white wall emblazoned with the blue Lumina Horizon logo, the sound of laughter from the sales team celebrating a new deal. He looked older than she remembered, hair streaked with gray, his voice raspy as he muttered, "Noisy but alive." Her mother looked straight at Harper, not avoiding her gaze as she once did. She drew in a breath, her voice trembling but firm. "We were wrong, Harper. Wrong for a long time." Harper pulled out chairs and invited them into a small conference room. Meeting their eyes, she said, "This door was never closed, but the rules here are clear. Respect, honesty, fairness, no shortcuts, no more comparisons." Richard's lips moved, struggling to form the words until at last he managed haltingly, "I'm sorry for not believing in you." The words were short, awkward, but it was the first time Harper had ever heard them from him. She felt herself trembling, but instead of tears, she simply nodded. "Thank you for saying that." A week after that meeting, Isabella reported Olivia had reapplied, this time not for senior program manager, but for marketing coordinator, an entry-level position aligned with her actual skills. Her application included a written test design, a lifecycle email sequence for new customers, draft social copy measured against engagement KPIs, and complete a case study on turning user-generated content into qualified leads. The results weren't brilliant, but they were enough to pass. Olivia was invited to interview like every other candidate, seated in front of the same panel and the same questions, with no special treatment. When the panel scored her, the result landed in the acceptable range. Isabella announced the salary within the transparent pay band, not a cent more than her peers. Harper signed the approval, feeling both unfamiliar and at peace. Her sister was finally entering this company not under the title of Richard and Claire's darling daughter, but through her own effort, even if at the lowest starting line. That evening, Harper went over to Sophie's house. The kitchen was filled with the smell of waffles, and Noah came running to show off the Christmas card he had made by hand. She told Sophie everything from the meeting with her parents to Olivia starting over. Sophie sat silent for a moment, then laid her hand on Harper's. "Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, Harper. Forgiving means you stop letting the old wound drive your life. You're still driving, but now with your own hands on the wheel." Harper sat there, listening to the sound of children laughing in the living room, the warm glow of yellow light spilling across the dining table. She knew the road with her family would still be long, and there would be no miracle of reconciliation overnight. But the small steps, an apology, recognition, a fair starting point for Olivia had begun to appear. And for her, that was enough to call them steps in the right direction. 3 months after the day Olivia officially signed her contract as a marketing coordinator, the rhythm of life at Lumina Horizon felt different. Harper still remembered her sister's first morning in the office, the confident air replaced by a trace of nervousness, her eyes flicking toward Harper as if testing for a reaction. But week by week, Harper saw the change, not in how Olivia carried herself, but in her work rhythm. Olivia started coming in early sometimes, even sitting in the cafe downstairs before the office opened. Late at night, when Harper walked past the marketing desks, her screen still glowed, filled with basic SQL queries, awkward, clumsy lines of code, but written with real effort. Elena, who had sat on the interview panel that day later, reported to Harper, "She shadows the team sprint every other week. Sometimes she doesn't catch on. Sometimes she completely mistakes concepts like velocity or backlog refinement. But the next time she studies again, corrects herself and improves." Harper nodded, saying nothing, but inside she felt something unfamiliar. Not pride exactly, but a quiet relief that her sister was at least in part willing to begin from a starting line that matched her true ability. On another front, her parents began to change too, not loudly but unmistakably. Claire started calling Harper every weekend. She no longer repeated Olivia's name or slipped into comparisons. Instead, she asked, "What are you working on? Are you too busy? Have you rested at all?" Harper listened, answered, and realized for the first time. Her mother's voice sounded like that of a mother genuinely caring for her daughter, not a spectator focused only on the performance of the favorite child. Richard, for his part, sent emails, sometimes an article on SaaS, sometimes a case study on AI workflows, always with the note, "I found this interesting. What do you think?" For the first time, he wasn't imposing, wasn't dismissive, but genuinely wanted to hear Harper's analysis. One afternoon at the end of November, Harper found a small envelope on her desk. Inside was an anniversary card from her parents in her mother's handwriting. "Come if you want, no dress code, just family." Harper held that card for a long time. It wasn't a perfect promise, nor a complete redemption, but it was utterly different from all the invitations before. No instructions on how to dress. No emphasis on important guests, just a simple invitation. The night before her flight, Harper drove out of downtown Austin, her car rolling north for hundreds of miles. Before turning into the hotel in Columbus, she found herself detouring past the old house where her childhood had been stretched thin into the role of the backup daughter. The house still stood, its paint faded, its windows glowing with the same familiar yellow light. Harper stopped across the street, opened the glove compartment, and took out the snow globe. With a gentle shake, she watched the white flakes swirl, drifting down onto the tiny house inside the glass. Calmly, she whispered, "I don't need them to define me anymore." The next morning, as Harper walked into the anniversary gathering, she no longer counted empty chairs, wondered who sat beside whom, or worried about which eyes turned toward her. She simply chose her own table, a place to have an honest conversation with her mother, to listen as her father shared an article he had read, and to see Olivia focused as she told a new colleague about the time she learned how to write acceptance criteria. No grand stage was needed, only the simple feeling of having a seat without having to bow her head. One evening, after everyone had left, Harper found Olivia alone in the break room, staring at her computer screen, tears streaming down her face. She was struggling with a database query, the kind of technical challenge that had never been part of her world before. Harper paused at the doorway, unsure if she should enter or leave her sister to her moment of frustration. But something in Olivia's posture, the defeat in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped the edge of the table, reminded Harper of herself all those years ago, sitting alone in a college library at midnight, working 3 jobs and fighting to understand complex algorithms. She moved forward quietly and sat beside Olivia. Her sister quickly wiped her tears, embarrassed to be caught in a moment of weakness. "I don't know how you did this," Olivia whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Built all this from nothing. Learned everything alone." Harper looked at the screen at the simple query that had brought her confident sister to tears. "I wasn't born knowing it either." Olivia's shoulders shook slightly. "But they gave you nothing, and they gave me everything. Yet here I am, not even able to write a basic query. I feel so useless." "Not useless," Harper said softly. "Just starting at the actual beginning instead of being placed at the finish line." For a moment they sat in silence, the office quiet around them, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Then Olivia spoke again, her voice low. They put so much pressure on me to be perfect, to be the star, the golden green daughter. I was terrified of disappointing them. What if I failed? What if I wasn't special? She looked up at Harper, eyes red. But you were free in a way. They expected nothing so you could build anything. Harper felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. Her sister hadn't only been the recipient of privilege, she'd also been trapped by expectations, by the fear of falling from grace. "Let me help you with that query," Harper said finally. She pulled her chair closer and began explaining the basics, not doing the work for Olivia, but showing her how to think about the problem, step by step, line by line, until her sister's eyes lit with comprehension. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was the beginning of something new. A relationship built not on family roles, but on the simple act of one person helping another grow. That Christmas, Harper was no longer haunted by being shut out. She could be at Sophie's house gathered with Noah and May as they hung another Aunt Harper ornament on the tree. Or she could return to Columbus if it felt safe without pressure. The choice rested with her, not with conditional invitations. And now, as she tells this story, Harper realizes something simple. True victory is not making anyone else bow their head. It is no longer bowing hers to the old version of herself. She has left the old door behind and stepped into the room she built, warm enough to sit in and bright enough to finally see herself clearly. And should anyone ever find themselves pushed away from a table simply because they don't fit the mold someone else built for them, they should remember this truth that Harper learned through years of pain and triumph. You can always build your own table. Seasons change slowly in Austin, where winter feels like a gentle visitor rather than an occupying force. By early spring, the bluebonnets had already begun to carpet the roadsides, and Lumina Horizon was riding a wave of success that had carried them far beyond their initial projections. Harper sat in her office reviewing the expansion plans for Nashville, her laptop screen illuminating her face in the soft morning light. The Nashville office would be their first footprint outside of Texas, a bold move that had the board both excited and nervous. But the data was clear. The healthcare industry in Nashville was primed for their product, and early meetings with potential clients had yielded promising results. Harper's phone buzzed with a message from Isabella. "The marketing team's presentation on the new client acquisition campaign starts in 5 minutes. She gathered her notes and made her way to the conference room. The company had grown to nearly 70 employees now, and the original office space had been expanded to take over the entire floor. Walking through the open workspace, Harper nodded to engineers deep in code, customer success representatives on calls, and designers tweaking new interface elements. When she entered the conference room, she found the marketing team already assembled, slides ready on the projector. And there at the edge of the table sat Olivia, 6 months into her role as marketing coordinator, her notebook open and pen poised. Their eyes met briefly, a moment of quiet acknowledgement before Harper took her seat. The presentation began with the head of marketing running through the strategy for targeting small to mid-sized healthcare providers across the Southeast. When it came time for individual team members to present their portions, Olivia stood up, her posture straight, but her hands betraying a slight tremor. "For the social media component," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves, "we've developed a 3-tier approach based on customer journey mapping." Harper watched as her sister walked through slides showing detailed analytics, engagement rates, and conversion funnels. There was real data behind the pretty graphics, actual strategy behind the polished phrases. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it was competent, honest work. When the meeting ended and the team filed out, Olivia lingered behind, organizing her notes. Harper paused at the door, considering whether to say something or let the moment pass. But before she could decide, Olivia spoke without looking up. "The Elena is helping me take a course on product management fundamentals," she said quietly. "I stay late on Thursdays for it." Harper nodded, a simple acknowledgement of effort. "That's good. The company covers educational expenses if you want to formalize any certifications." "I know," Olivia replied. I've already applied for the program reimbursement." A small silence stretched between them, not entirely uncomfortable. Then Olivia added, "Mom asked if you're coming to Columbus for the summer holiday." Harper hadn't been back since the anniversary gathering. "I haven't decided yet. The Nashville expansion is taking most of my bandwidth. They're different now, Olivia said, finally meeting Harper's eyes. Not perfect, but different. Dad actually asked me about my sequel progress yesterday. He didn't understand a word of what I said, but he asked. Harper allowed a small smile. That's something. As she walked back to her office, Harper reflected on how much had changed in just half a year. The shift wasn't just in her family, but in herself. The raw edge of pain that had accompanied thoughts of home for so many years had dulled. Not gone, but transformed into something she could carry without it cutting into her every time she moved. Later that afternoon, Harper received an email from Richard. Unlike his usual articles about technology, this one contained only a link to a property listing in Austin, a small house not far from Lumina Horizons' office. The message read, "Your mother and I are considering spending winters in Austin. The summers in Ohio are getting harder to leave, but the winters are getting harder to endure. Would this location make visits easier? Not trying to intrude on your space, just trying to meet halfway." Harper stared at the screen, a complex emotion rising in her chest. Her father, who had once forbidden her from coming home because she didn't fit their image, was now asking if he could come to her city, carefully checking boundaries, acknowledging her space. She clicked through the listing. The house was modest, nothing like their sprawling Columbus home, but charming with its small garden and screened porch. Harper could picture her mother tending to potted plants there, her father reading on the porch swing. "The location is good," she typed in response. "Close enough for dinner visits, far enough for privacy. Let me know if you want me to look at it in person before you make any decisions." She hit send, then leaned back in her chair, contemplating this new development. Her parents stepping into her world rather than demanding she fit into theirs. It wasn't an apology in words, but it was one in action, and sometimes those spoke louder. The summer months brought sweltering heat to Austin, the kind that shimmered above the pavement and made the air conditioning at Lumina Horizon work overtime. But inside the cool offices, the company continued to thrive. The Nashville location was secured, hiring was underway for the new office, and their client roster had expanded significantly. Harper's phone rang one Friday afternoon as she was preparing to leave for the weekend. Sophie's name flashed on the screen. "Hey," Harper answered, tucking the phone between her ear and shoulder as she packed her laptop. "I'm still on for Noah's baseball game tomorrow." "Actually," Sophie's voice had an unusual urgency to it, "that's not why I'm calling. I just got off the phone with a producer from Business Innovators. They're doing a feature on women in tech who built companies from scratch, and your name came up. They want to interview you for their cover story." Harper froze. Business Innovators was one of the most respected business magazines in the country. A cover story would put Lumina Horizon, and by extension Harper herself, in the national spotlight. "They don't know, do they?" Harper asked quietly. "About HQ Green?" "No," Sophie confirmed. "They reached out to me because I'm listed as your PR contact. As far as they know, Harper Green and HQ Green are the same person publicly. This is your decision, Harper. You can stay behind the pseudonym or step into the light." Harper sat down slowly, her mind racing. For years, she had kept her full identity hidden, partly out of privacy concerns, but largely because she wasn't ready for her family to know about her success. But now, with the changes of the past months, that reason no longer held the same weight. "Let me think about it," she said finally. "When do they need an answer?" "Monday at the latest. The issue goes to print in 3 weeks." After hanging up, Harper stared out of her office window at the Austin skyline, golden in the late afternoon sun. Accepting this interview would mean fully stepping out of the shadows, allowing her story to be told, including perhaps the parts about her family. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out the snow globe, now slightly worn from years of handling. The tiny flakes swirled as she turned it over, falling gently onto the miniature house inside. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. Patience has its own kind of magic. She had been patient. She had built something real and lasting. Perhaps it was time to claim it fully, not just as HQ Green, the mysterious tech founder, but as Harper Green, the woman who had once been told she didn't belong at the family table. Harper made her decision. She would do the interview, but first, she needed to have a conversation with her family. They deserved to hear this from her, not from a magazine cover at the grocery store checkout. The following week, Richard and Claire did indeed come to Austin to look at the property they were considering. Harper invited them to dinner at her home, a modern condo overlooking Lady Bird Lake that she had purchased the year before. It was the first time they had visited her personal space, and she watched as they took in the clean lines, the wall of books, the framed photograph of the Lumina Horizon team on its first anniversary. Over a meal Harper had carefully prepared, she told them about the magazine offer. "They want to feature me on the cover," she explained, watching their faces carefully. "It would include my background, my journey to founding Lumina Horizon. It would be very public." Claire set down her fork, her eyes widening slightly. "You mean everyone would know our friends in Columbus, the people from church?" "Yes," Harper confirmed. "Everyone would know that I built this company from nothing, that I'm HQ Green." Richard's expression was harder to read, a mixture of emotions crossing his face in rapid succession. "And they would know about us, about how we treated you." Harper took a sip of her wine, considering her words carefully. "I haven't decided how much of that to share. But I won't lie if they ask about my support system growing up. I can't pretend there was encouragement where there wasn't." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but to Harper's surprise she nodded. "That's fair. We can't ask you to rewrite history to make us look better. We failed you, Harper. If that becomes part of your public story, then we have to accept that." Richard reached across the table, not quite touching Harper's hand, but resting his own near it, a gesture of attempted connection. "Whatever you decide to say about us, we'll stand by it. It's the least we can do now." Harper hadn't expected this response. She had braced herself for defensiveness, for demands to keep family matters private. Instead, she found acceptance, even if tinged with regret. "Thank you," she said simply. "That means a lot." Later, as they prepared to leave, Claire paused at the door, her hand resting lightly on Harper's arm. "We're proud of you," she said softly. "We should have been proud all along, but we are now. Truly." After they left, Harper stood on her balcony, looking out over the glittering lights of downtown Austin. Her parents' words settled around her like a gentle weight, not heavy enough to burden, but substantial enough to feel real. Pride was something she had stopped seeking from them long ago, but hearing it now wasn't without effect. She texted Sophie, "I'll do the interview. Set it up." 2 days later, Harper sat in her office across from Mia Chen, the senior writer for Business Innovators. Mia was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed and attentive, her recorder placed discreetly on the table between them. "So, Harper," Mia began after the preliminaries were out of the way, "tell me about the beginning. What inspired you to create Lumina Horizon?" Harper took a deep breath and started her story, not with the technical inspiration or market gap, but with the truth that lay beneath it all. "I grew up in a family where I was always the backup plan," she said, her voice steady. "My sister was the star, and I was the one expected to handle myself. So I did perhaps better than anyone anticipated. I worked my way through college with 3 jobs while maintaining a full scholarship. I learned early that if I wanted something, I would have to build it myself because no one was going to build it for me." Mia nodded, jotting notes despite the recorder. "And how did that translate into founding a tech company? When you've spent your life being overlooked, you develop an eye for others who are overlooked too. I saw all these small businesses being ignored by the big tech solutions, struggling with systems that weren't built for them. I understood what it felt like to be treated as an afterthought, so I created a product that put them first." The interview continued for nearly 2 hours, covering Harper's technical journey, the early struggles of the company, and the eventual breakthrough. Throughout, Harper was candid about the lack of family support, though she never named her sister or portrayed her parents as villains. They were simply people who had made choices she had to overcome. Toward the end, Mia asked a question Harper hadn't anticipated. "Your sister now works for your company, doesn't she? How did that come about?" Harper paused, considering how much to share. "Yes, she does. She applied for a position, went through the same hiring process as any other candidate, and has been working her way up from an entry-level role. It's been educational for both of us." "And your relationship now?" "We're rebuilding," Harper said thoughtfully. "On new ground with new rules. The old patterns don't work anymore, so we're creating something different." When the interview concluded, Mia thanked her warmly. "This is going to be a powerful story, Harper. Not just about business success, but about resilience and creating your own path. We'll send the draft for your approval before publication." After Mia left, Harper sat quietly in her office, processing the experience of having voiced her story so openly. There was a strange lightness to it, as if speaking the truth had released some long-held tension in her shoulders. The magazine article was scheduled to be published in July. In the weeks leading up to it, Lumina Horizon continued its expansion preparations, and Harper found herself busier than ever. But amid the professional whirlwind, there were small moments of personal shift. Olivia requested a meeting with her one afternoon, formally scheduled through Harper's assistant. When she arrived, she carried a folder containing her 6-month performance review and a proposal for advancing to the next level position. "I've completed the product management course," she explained, sliding the certificates across the desk. "And Elena has signed off on my technical skills improvement. I believe I'm ready for the associate PM role now." Harper reviewed the documents carefully. The performance metrics were solid, not exceptional, but certainly meeting all requirements. Elena's note was detailed and positive, highlighting Olivia's willingness to learn and adapt. "These look good," Harper acknowledged. "The promotion process requires panel approval, but I'll put your application forward at the next review meeting." Olivia nodded, professional and composed. "Thank you. That's all I ask." As she stood to leave, Olivia hesitated, then added, "I saw the photographer from the magazine yesterday. The pictures they took of you were really good." "Thanks," Harper replied, a small smile forming. "They made me change outfits 3 times to get the authentic tech founder look just right." Olivia laughed, a genuine sound that momentarily bridged the careful distance between them. "Well, they succeeded. You look like yourself." It was a simple comment, but it lingered with Harper long after Olivia had gone. You look like yourself. After years of shrinking, of being molded to fit into spaces too small for her, being recognized as authentically herself felt profoundly significant. The day the magazine hit newsstands, Harper deliberately avoided looking at it. She went about her morning routine as usual, reviewed contracts for the Nashville office lease, and attended a product development meeting. It wasn't until Isabella knocked on her door around noon, magazine in hand, that she finally confronted it. "It's everywhere," Isabella announced, placing the issue on Harper's desk. "The reception desk has already fielded calls from 3 national news outlets wanting follow-up interviews." There on the cover was Harper standing confidently in front of the Lumina Horizon logo, arms crossed, expression determined yet approachable. The headline read, "Building Her Own Table: How Harper Green Turned Rejection into a Tech Empire." Harper stared at it, the surreal feeling of seeing her face, her real name, her story displayed so publicly washing over her. She had been hidden behind the HQ initials for so long that this exposure felt both terrifying and liberating. "It's a great article," Isabella continued. "Honest without being bitter. Inspiring without being preachy. The team is really proud, Harper." After Isabella left, Harper finally read the piece from beginning to end. Mia had done an excellent job capturing her journey, weaving the personal narrative with the business success story in a way that felt authentic. The sidebar highlighting Lumina Horizon's innovative approach to AI in customer relationship management was technically accurate and compelling. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing with notifications since morning, but one text in particular caught her attention. It was from her mother. "We just saw the magazine. You look so strong and beautiful. We're coming to Austin next week. Would you have dinner with us?" Harper typed back a simple, "Yes," then set her phone aside and returned to work. The world might be reacting to her story, but the story itself was still being written one day at a time. The dinner with her parents was quieter than she had expected. They brought the magazine dog-eared and clearly read multiple times but didn't mention it until dessert. Then Richard cleared his throat. The familiar sound that had once preceded criticism, but now seemed to signal a different kind of discomfort. "Your grandmother would have been proud," he said, his voice slightly rough. "She always saw something in you that we missed." Claire reached across the table, and for the first time in Harper's adult memory took her hand. "The article mentioned how you kept all those snow globes she gave you, that you still have one on your desk at work." Harper nodded, surprised they had focused on this detail. "They reminded me that patience wasn't the same as giving up." that waiting for the right moment didn't mean accepting less than I deserved. She told me once, Richard said slowly, that you were building something inside yourself that would outlast all of us. I didn't understand what she meant then. I think I do now. They didn't apologize again that night. Perhaps they sensed that words had reached their limit, that only actions would matter going forward. But there was an ease between them that felt new, as if the public acknowledgement of their past failures had somehow freed them all to move beyond them. The Nashville office opened in August, a sleek space in a renovated historic building downtown. Harper flew in for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, bringing a small team, including Olivia, who had indeed been promoted to associate product manager after the review panel's unanimous approval. Standing before the gathered employees, local press, and curious onlookers, Harper felt a moment of perfect clarity. This expansion wasn't just a business milestone. It was tangible proof of how far she had come from that girl who once sat alone at a piano recital waiting for applause that never came. Lumina Horizon began with a simple insight, she told the crowd, that everyone deserves to be seen, to have tools built specifically for their needs, not adapted as an afterthought. We believe in building tables where everyone has a seat, where no one is pushed to the margins. Her eyes met Olivia's briefly in the audience, a moment of silent understanding passing between them. They were both learning what it meant to earn a seat to build, rather than be given to grow beyond the roles assigned to them in childhood. After the ceremony, as they walked through the vibrant streets of Nashville, Olivia fell into step beside Harper. "I'm being considered for the team lead position here," she said, a hint of nervous excitement in her voice. "Elena recommended me." Harper glanced at her, genuinely surprised. "That's a big step. Are you ready for it?" "I think so," Olivia replied thoughtfully. "It's strange. All those years of being told I was special made me terrified of failing. But actually failing and then getting back up, learning, improving, that's made me feel capable in a way I never did before." They stopped at a street corner waiting for the light to change. In the distance, the Cumberland River caught the afternoon sun gleaming gold between the buildings. "I understand why you left," Olivia continued softly. "Why you built all this without telling us. I think I would have done the same." Harper considered this, the sister who had once been the center of their family's universe, now standing beside her as a colleague, a fellow professional finding her own way. "Maybe," Harper acknowledged, "but you're building something too now. Something that's yours, not theirs." The light changed, and they crossed the street toward the river. As they walked, Harper realized that the Nashville office represented something beyond business expansion. It was another table being built, another space where people could gather based on merit and contribution, not predetermined roles or expectations. That Christmas, Harper had options. Sophie and her family were hosting their annual gathering, complete with homemade ornaments and board games. Her parents had invited her to Columbus, where things would be different this time. No Westfields, no parish judgments, just family. But Harper chose something else entirely. She hosted Christmas dinner at her condo in Austin, inviting both worlds to converge: Sophie and her family, her parents Olivia, and even a few close colleagues from Lumina Horizon, who had nowhere else to go for the holiday. The living room glowed with soft light, the tree adorned with a curious mixture of ornaments, elegant glass baubles Claire had brought from Columbus, handmade creations from Noah and May, and in a place of honor near the top, a small snow globe with Aunt Harper written in faded glitter. As Harper moved through the room, refilling glasses and catching fragments of conversation, she observed the unlikely tableau she had created. Her father deep in discussion with Sophie's husband about woodworking, her mother helping May string popcorn for the tree, Noah showing Olivia his latest video game achievement with the solemn importance only an 8-year-old can convey. These were not people who would naturally have found each other, but they had all found their way to her table, one she had built large enough to accommodate every part of her life. Later, after the gifts had been opened and the dinner plates cleared away, Harper stepped out onto her balcony. The December air in Austin was cool, but not bitter, carrying the scent of cedar and distant fireplaces. She felt rather than heard someone join her, and turned to find her mother standing there, a shawl pulled around her shoulders against the night air. This was lovely, Claire said, looking out at the city lights. Different but lovely. Harper nodded, accepting the compliment for what it was. I wanted everyone to have a place, she explained simply. Claire was quiet for a moment, then spoke with unusual directness. When you were little, I thought being a good mother meant making sure Olivia didn't fall. She seemed so fragile, so dependent on our approval. But I never saw that by cushioning her every step, I was actually making her weaker. She turned to look at Harper fully. And I never saw that by assuming you were strong. I was forcing you to be strong alone. Harper felt the old pain stir, but it was muted now, a distant echo rather than a present wound. We can't change that history, she said gently, but we can write a different ending. Is that what you're doing now? Claire asked. Writing a new ending? Harper considered this, looking through the glass doors at the gathering inside the unlikely family she had pieced together from different parts of her life. No, she answered finally. I'm writing a new beginning. When the guests had gone and the condo was quiet again, Harper carefully packed away the leftover food, tidied the living room, and then sat alone by the still-lit Christmas tree. From her pocket, she took out the old snow globe, now worn smooth in places from years of handling. She shook it gently, watching as the tiny flakes swirled and settled on the miniature house inside. After all this time, the magic her grandmother had spoken of had never faded. Patience had indeed yielded its rewards, though not in the way she might once have expected. Harper placed the snow globe on her coffee table and sat back watching as the last flakes drifted down inside the glass. She had spent so many years fighting to be seen, to prove her worth, to earn a place at tables that were never truly set for her. Now she understood what her grandmother had been trying to tell her all along. The true power wasn't in being invited to someone else's table. It was in creating a table so magnificent that even those who once excluded you might someday ask for a seat. And when they did, you could choose to make room not from obligation or the need for validation, but from the strength that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you've built. Harper Green had built her own table, and it was more beautiful, more welcoming, and more true than anything she had ever been denied.